Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your attention. Welcome back from lunch. And my name's Ed Kuss. I'm the General Counsel and Company Secretary at Future Energy Australia, and also Chief Operating Officer at Frontier Impact Group. I hope you've all had a coffee or a cuppa and ready to overcome the food coma after lunch, because we've got some great panellists here and a really exciting discussion about gaps and barriers to industry growth. Our panellists today are Dennis Enright from the New Zealand Biochar in the middle there, Andrew Wells from Earth Systems, and Drew Chislett from Advanced Energy Technologies. And on the line, we have Louisa Keeley from Carbon Farmers Australia, our first virtual guest of the day. Louisa, I assume you can hear us well, and at the relevant time, I think I'll put you up on the screen to be the big brother sitting behind us here on the stage. But looking forward to that. And I can see that the panelists are raring to go. So, champing at the bit.
That way?
It's the chair's prerogative, I suppose, to do a bit of a quick introduction, and I'd like to mention the MD of Frontier Impact Group, Jennifer Lauber-Patterson, who unfortunately is travelling for work and is sorry she can't make it, but I'll do my best to fill her ample shoes, although I'm afraid I won't be able to fix the gender quota on the panel, so I'm sorry about that. So what is Future Energy Australia? Well, FEA is a joint venture company that Frontier Impact has created with ASX-listed Carnarvon Energy. We're developing Australia's first commercial-scale renewable diesel biorefinery in the Narrogin region of Western Australia, in the wheat belt there. When we achieve first production on that in 2024, we'll be producing about 18 million litres of renewable diesel, which will be able to be used in local farming and mining machinery as a replacement for traditional fossil fuel, no need for blending. But more importantly for this audience, we'll also be producing about 8,000 tonnes of high-grade biochar. And that's the part I'm really excited about, because we are intending to use that in various industrial and agricultural applications in the local economy, really championing that circular economy outcome. So, yeah, you can see behind me the artist impression here, which was prepared earlier this year from drone footage out there on Waneri Road on the outskirts of Narrogin. And I thought I'd use it as a quick example, because it really is the rubber hitting the road on a lot of the gaps and barriers we've already heard the other panellists talk about. And it's so exciting to be in the room with, I think it was described as exceptional horsepower in the biochar space. I agree, and I've already had plenty of exciting conversations and looking forward to lots more over the course of the afternoon. So that's probably enough about us, Future Energy, and our exciting plans. But what is stopping more projects like this from getting up off the ground? And that's the discussion we're hoping to have today, to hone in on a lot of the other themes that have already been shared amongst the panellists. So I think if we can flick to the next slide, that's my job, beg your pardon. ANSBIG is doing an exceptional job slating opinions to pull together its roadmap, and that is going to be such a fundamentally important document for the biochar industry. I'm excited to see it come together. One of the things that ANSBIG did was they ran a questionnaire which called up some themes, and I wanted to quickly run over those themes as a way of giving us an entree into the flavour of the discussion today. So I've tried to organise them in parallel survey responses and themes emerging. And we have heard about a lot of these already, so it'll be good to get a more focused discussion on them in this session. But supply constraints, and a rapidly growing industry. So our project will be producing almost on current volumes about half the entire production of biochar in Australia right now by 2024. So that obviously will change by 2024 as more projects are coming online, but there are huge, market dynamics at play at the moment. Price challenges, need for demonstration and trials. We've heard a lot about that. How do we more scientifically trial and demonstrate these important things? Inconsistencies in biochar quality from different technological processes and different feedstocks. Perceived and actual regulatory hurdles and education of regulators and the community. And finally, the perception of biomass security concerns. I was interested to read that right now, of all the waste biomass in Australia, only about 1% of it is put through pipes or pyrolysis carbon capture. So there's a huge opportunity there in Australia, which is a vast country, to really accelerate the pace and scale of adoption of pyrolysis and biochar. That's probably enough from me, so I'll throw over to the panel to get started. And when I do, I'll ask each of you to please give a quick intro of yourself, where you're from, your background in biochar, and then I'll hand over to answer the question. But first cab off the rank, I think, was Dennis. Dennis, what are the key regulatory barriers to industry growth, and what is being done or should be done to break these down?
Thank you for the question, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I started my journey in 2008 when someone introduced the word biochar to me, and I've travelled through many workshops and meetings to get to this stage here. And meetings are not really my top priority. I have a background in soil, fertiliser and soil research. That was my first 20 years. The next 20 years was involved with organic production and the various regulations and issues around certification. And the next 20 years is going to be biochar, starting in 2008. So I've landed the regulatory question. In New Zealand, I can mostly only speak to the New Zealand circumstance, and in this case, we do not have dedicated production of biochar available in New Zealand. So many of the questions and considerations that you people have had to face via different states and different approaches, we haven't come across just yet. We do have quite a significant industry in terms of using the byproducts of furnaces from sawmills, which provides a product which is anything up to 50, 60, 70% carbon due to the management, the type of moisture, the type of feedstock. Not so much the type, because we're always dealing in New Zealand at the moment with pine, and it's really the moisture and settings on their furnaces. So I hesitated there for a minute because it nearly caused a waste and an ash, and I think that's one of the critical issues that can lead to confusion and concern from regulators when they start thinking that we're dealing with products that may have different characteristics to which we believe they have in terms of their toxicities and issues. So I think the way we language how we deal with different materials has an impact with regulators. I also think that in New Zealand we have quite a range of regulations that would fit and help manage the production and use of biochar. We have the Resource Management Act, and sitting under that we have district and regional plans that provide particularly issues around air emissions and water potentially water contamination. So I think it's highly critical that we bring to the attention of producers, users and regulators that these particular rules and regulations are in effect and should apply to biochar. There are some circumstances where I'm sure there will be issues that come about due to production that I'm not familiar with, that will need particular attention. And so we have those sort of acts, and then we have the EPA, as you do here, and of course biochar by its very nature can be deemed a hazardous substance due to its flammability, at least under certain circumstances. So far in New Zealand, most people that are actually using and selling biochar are keeping well below the radar and consequently hoping it might all go away. But it's in front of us. We have to look at that, and we have to be aware of that. And we have to work through it and be proactive. So, picking out some of the words from previous speakers, we definitely have to collaborate, and we have to try collaboration between ourselves to create the appropriate language and understand the regulations that are required, and we have to get alongside regulators as much as possible and provide information, inform them of the issues that we understand are out there for this industry, and solve that the regulatory process that needs to be adopted to provide the security for all concerned. So it's communication, it's collaboration, and Annette very clearly pointed out earlier some of the questions and reasons why there is uncertainty, there is potentially concern. And the last part of this equation is also the fact that we are very much a fledgling industry, and so there's got to be clarification, there's got to be communication, and making sure we're not fighting the regulators. We want to be involved in the process of developing those regulations. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Nigel. And I'm getting some finger pointing from the guys off the side, but I think next up we're going to throw to Louisa on the Zoom. I'm really interested to hear from Louisa about the barriers and gaps to more rapid pace and scale of biochar uptake in the agricultural and farming community. Louisa, take it away.
There, lads. I'm running on New South Wales time. I've just been, it's just come to my notice, and therefore, yes, I've got another meeting in a short amount of time, so I do apologise for that. So, Louisa Kiley, Carbon Farmers of Australia. We have been best known for our work in the soil carbon space. And I'd like to sort of, talk about that just a little bit. I've got 7 minutes and no timer, so somebody hit me on the head if I go too long. And so, how did we get? We first learned about biochar when we were looking into the whole for carbon farming and trade. So, Carbon Farmers of Australia, we carbon project developers and partners, specifically in the ERF, the Emissions Reduction Fund. And so we assist farmers to be paid for the carbon that they store in trees and back in soils. And we have been in this since around 2005. My first conference was 2007, and my last conference was in Albury in May of this year, at which ANZSB had a role, which was fantastic to see. So as soon as we heard about it, we were as excited as everybody else who comes into this space. The number of different ways that you can use biochar, so many choices, and I think one of your challenges will be, are you focusing on carbon in the soils, or are you focusing on non-agricultural sides of things? Where exactly does it fit? But we have known many of the luminaries in the room for quite some time: Stephen Joseph, Annette Cowie, Stuart Larson, and I certainly thank Jen Lauber-Patterson for also enabling you guys to get involved. So the barriers, I think, in this space, and I've been listening dutifully and interestedly this morning, I think the barriers have come out really clearly. The barriers, lack of information. It's across ERF methods in the ERF space, which is the Emissions Reduction Fund, which is where you can put in a method which is very specific as to what you can and can't do in order to be paid for certain new activities. The result, when you put one of those in, is an Australian carbon credit unit, which we haven't really spoken about within this, but this is our bread and butter on each of our days that we come into the office. And also, so the barriers to biochar are also reflected in the overall barriers to the ERF. And yet, the ERF and the carbon funding for carbon trade under the ERF is worth well over $2.5 billion to the economy at the moment. Which is why, if you've heard that there is a Chubb review into the ACCUs, and you might have heard some other publicity lately, we don't believe that the Australian methods will be dropped in any way. There might be a tweaking of them, more integrity, more monitoring, but trust me, in this space, and there are some experts in the room, we are already highly regulated. So if you're worried about getting into the credit side of it because of regulations or any of those things, we are highly regulated. We're well thought of internationally, and we've got a great contribution to continue to make. So those things like lack of information, lack of knowledge. What is a method? This is just my little area of carbon funding for carbon trade. What is that method? We've already heard about, you can use biochar in the 2021 soil carbon method, but what are the conditions under which you do it? So that education piece has been lacking right through, which is one of the main reasons I put on a carbon funding conference and expo, so that I gather 400 people, 35 exhibitors, and I allow people to talk. I bring the experts in and to inform and grow the whole industry. So I believe you've got a role to grow your whole biochar industry. So rather than focus on those barriers, I would like to join the people who have been talking about the successes, how you can move forward. And I think the lobbying side of it is a really, really important part. Working with the clean energy regulator, yes. However, we've got a new government, you've got new politicians. You can go and knock on their doors at the moment. They are open, especially in the Teals and the Greens. They're looking for ideas. But yes, you do have to be reasonably organised. By the time you get there, you have to know what problem of theirs you are solving. Never go to a poly with a problem. Always go to a poly with a solution, with some of the things we've done with that. With the soil carbon space, we have, it's just a dedicated crew of, a small amount of people still. And still we've managed to now, through the Clean Energy Regulator, we've had 3 iterations of the soil carbon method, and biochar hasn't had one. Now that is it's a difficult area for all of the things that we're saying, not just the cost, not just the supply, but the feedstock and all of those different things that you've already identified. How do you make one method, out of that? But the continuation of going back to them is really important. Soil carbon has managed to have 3 iterations. We've managed to also sell the only soil carbon credits internationally, and we've got. I just took a quick look before I was coming on. I don't believe ANZPIC is a member of the Carbon Market Institute. They are the peak body in this area, in this carbon farming and carbon market area. So I think there are some, really good short-term things that can be done in that lobbying space. Yes, you have to be reasonable, but we didn't have all the answers. When we went to them and said, have we got a soil carbon solution for you? We didn't have all of the answers. So don't let that stop you. If one of your task forces that come out of this is lobbying, then, with the one-page, all of those sort of things to get going is what I would suggest, Ed. And I have to apologise because I do have to run in just a few minutes.
Thanks very much, Louisa. Thanks for your time and thanks for your contribution. Don's giving me the thumbs up that ANZPIC is definitely a member of the Carbon Markets Institute, so that's good. But I would like to see a biochar expo. Maybe that's the next cab off the rank, guys. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would too.
Terrific. Thanks, Louisa. Next question is for Andrew, and it's a more of a general one to Andrew. What are the gaps or barriers you're seeing from your perspective of commercialisation of these biochar opportunities, Andrew?
Thanks very much, Ed. My name's Andrew Wells. I have a background in agribusiness with specific interests in sustainable ag and the role that biochar can possibly play in that space. At Earth Systems, I'm a new person and participant here. I'm helping commercialise our CharMaker technology and build markets for biochar. So I'm here to learn, to meet and hopefully contribute. And thank you, Peter. I'm a champion. Addressing the question at hand, there are huge possibilities for the application and use of biochar. They're many and varied, and that's also part of the issue that creates some confusion around its use. And if you're going to ag markets, one of the questions that farmers or users all ask is, how much do I use? Where do I place it? How do I apply it? And there's a huge range of rates and applications, and none of those are potentially well understood. There are lots of little bits and pieces of information which are being formed, but often what users relate biochar to is one of 2 products that they are far more familiar with. One's compost and the other is fertiliser. And those have been extremely well studied and far more understood in terms of the application rates. And so one of the barriers is, how do we compress all of that knowledge and learnings in a short space of time in order to arm and provide people with a level of certainty on the use of these products. So also, when you talk in the context of a regulatory framework, the regulators and regulatory authorities often also come and face the very same predicament. they're not quite sure what biochar is. There's a range of terminologies that are new to them and users. Many of them don't necessarily know what biomass is, and that's the same with users. Their approach is typically to manage risk, and so by default they're risk averse, and there is a use of the precautionary principle in what they do. So I think we heard earlier today from Joanna the positive aspects about collaborating and taking regulatory bodies like the EPA together on that journey. We certainly need to do that. We talked about the terminology, and I think broadly, still a lot of people simply don't understand what biochar is, and so creating and lifting a high level of awareness is essential. So that's biochar. Biomass is the other area where people are confused. But when you talk about waste, everyone knows what waste is. And if you're a regulator, then you also know that waste is potentially risky. And so that's part of the mindset where what we're all involved in sends us down a waste route rather than a resource route. And we need to turn some of that thinking around and share the approach that the resources and the biomass sources that we are using and converting to biochar are actually a resource, a key resource to be valued. So I think one of the other points that I'm keen to make is fundamentally ACCUs are out of step with the voluntary market, so we need to find a way of getting biochar included into that area. It's in some ways quite embarrassing that in a country particularly like Australia, biochar is simply not recognised, and yet the voluntary markets certainly from Europe and now from the US directly recognise the role that biochar has as one of the most tangible forms of carbon sequestration. I might leave it there. Thanks, Ed.
Terrific, thanks, Andrew. I love the point you're making about education, and we'll hopefully get into that a bit more in the discussion. But the next question is for Drew, and it is: what are some of the key stigmas or misconceptions surrounding biochar, and how do we in the industry best address these issues?
My name's Drew Chislett. I've been addicted to biochar for 6 years. Feel like I need a hand up. No, yeah. Go at a Biochar Anonymous conference here, right? I think there's going to be a little video play on the screen now. So I am from Central Victoria, part of a little company called Advanced Energy Tech. At Advanced Energy Tech, we call ourselves a waste and energy solutions company. So not just waste to energy, because I think the space varies a lot. And I guess at Advanced Energy Tech, we see ourselves as an implementation partner. So we're delivering localised, decentralised modular solutions. So we provide a service to either a business or a local council where they say, here's our waste stream, here's our energy demand within that community. Let's pull these two together and let's see if we can come up with a solution. Now, what you're seeing on the screen up here is our demonstration site. We've set up a demonstration site at a typical little Victorian landfill council, unlicensed, which is, I think the EPA is going to be clamping down on those fairly soon. We built a facility and a structure that can be set up on an old cell, and it actually can be removed. Let's hope that one day landfills are no more, and we can pull this structure down. But it's very modular and scalable in that sense of what we do. But I guess we see ourselves, this demonstration site is, we've just gained our approval from the EPA. What a journey that's been. I think Nigel and the Earth System teams and many of you guys understand that in great detail. It's like, I think, nearly an 18-month process, which incorporated in Victoria the change of policy, a change of staff, and a whole lot of adventures. And so we've actually approved to demonstrate 8 different feedstocks. And to de-risk that for the EPA, we are categorising them in risk. We start with our biomass, so with a biomass to produce biochar. But then with this site, we go all the way up to MSW, municipal solid waste, and actually even medical waste. So the technology that we have in place for that, so at AET, we're just not focused on one piece of tech. We want to try and bring that whole solution to whether it's power generation or heating or cooling or whatever it might be. But the tech that we've chosen to convert these solids to usable heat energy is gasification. Now, I think if Stephen Joseph was saying, we are flaming pyrolysis gasification, a multi-stage reaction. And I think I just confused a few of you guys, just write that, and I'm not sure whether this is some of the problem. We sometimes don't know what's pyrolysis and what's gasification. It's quite an interesting thing, and I think our messaging has to be clear on that. But our technology is a stage technology where we're getting high-grade clean heat, and in this site, we're going to be converting that to electricity through a heat-to-power turbine. And again, the point being to de-risk it from a regulatory perspective, de-risk it from an economic perspective. A business can bring us a feedstock and say, how's this going to work through this technology? Or what technology do we need in place to make this work, to make it viable? Also, we want to de-risk it for a community. And I think that's something that we need to talk about a little bit more, where the social license of what we're doing. Our projects can rise or fall on our community response. And we, like it or not, live under a perception that the community is looking at us as we're creating biochar, we're reacting, we're using heat, fire. What are we doing? And what they don't know, they'll make up. And so our ability to engage the community is super important. And our ability to listen to what the community says and respond to the community, I think, is an important thing. So I talk about stigmas. And I think I don't want to talk too much about what are the problems. I think we've all talked about the problems. I think we know that. But what is maybe our response to the problems? How do we react as a business? Because like it or not, it's our baby and someone's having a crack at it. You know, so how do we respond back to those things? So that's something I want to look at. Social license. We actually established a little focus group. We advertised in the paper. We chose a small regional community because our ability to do that. We go to a metropolitan centre. This is going to be harder to achieve, absolutely. Bless you guys that have done that. That's hard work. And so our focus group, we brought up early stages. We've walked them through this, knowing that these are our hands and feet in the community. These are our voices in the community, and help them understand what we're doing. And actually got a chance to hear from them, what are the questions? What are the problems? What are people saying about what we're doing? And so, look, I think some of the questions are pretty simple, legit. You know, what you're doing, is it going to kill us? You know, we got an email at 2:30 in the morning, one morning, from a quite angry person, like, you've gone and without our permission put a blast furnace on the hill and you're going to emit black coal dust all over us and kill us. And it's like, oh man, you know, he just made that up. But anyhow, it helped us see there's a communication gap. And I guess I want to encourage us. We've been talking about it lots. Communication is key. It's king. And so yeah, I think I'll rush through a few more. Why are we burning trees? Isn't that bad? People will talk about that. We all know the answers to that, but they're things we have to communicate and we have to understand. We've actually got the luxury in town. A guy has built a big facility and he's going to process hemp there. Well, that's social license. That's fantastic. Who doesn't want to see us burn hemp? You know, apparently it grows like a weed and it smells nice when it's burnt. But it's another whole topic right there. But there's a business. Does it work? Isn't this just for the greenies and the hippies? I'm saying it because it's sometimes how we're perceived. We know full well not. The science is real. I'm going to get my bum kicked in a second. And the best thing that happened is Don moved out of Byron Bay. He's come down to Victoria. And it's, I'm only joking with that. But I think we have been people that have been innovators and developers, and we've in our backyards come up with some amazing responses to this and cool technology, but there's a gap between that and the corporate that we need to cross. So the other thing is the corporate maturity. I think we need to add to. Nigel's been talking about that. Ansby, I think, is talking about that. How we connect with the corporate costs. It's heaps to say, but I've blown my time. Cost of land and fert is making biochar very attainable for ag. I'm a farmer. I can see the numbers work. I don't have a problem with the numbers anymore.
Thanks.
Gap between developers, investors, corporate market. Are we investable? These guys down here want to know if we're investable. Anyway, keep going.
Thanks very much. I'll see you for but I think the first question I'd like to ask in the meantime, get your questions in. You can see the QR code. Fire your questions in for the guys. The first question I was going to ask was just honing in on that education piece, because we've heard about your really interesting challenges with the community.
Yep.
And Dennis was talking about education too. How do we, I think it was Paul Keating who said you've got to be able to walk and chew gum or something like that. How do we communicate to the community but also educate and communicate persuasively to the regulators? Is it the same thing?
No, two very different things. We learned that lesson the hard way. We spent a whole bunch of money on a consultant, nearly 100 grand on a consultant, and had to offload them because they weren't communicating to the regulators in the language the regulator could hear. Communicating to the community. I want to ask a question. Who's a full-time agronomist any full-time agronomists? Isn't that interesting? I'm wondering whether we're missing who we should be communicating to. These guys are on the ground delivering to farmers. They need educating. I run across my agronomists and I'm educating them about biochar. We need to somehow talk about that, AgVic, NFF, VFF, Dairy Oz, all of those. We need to bring these guys in and we need to sit them down and help them through the communication to a community, our client, but also that filters through to a whole community. That's one option. Sorry, I'll keep yabbering if you let me go.
Terrific, yeah. It looks like Dennis wants to say something.
Do I? Good thinking. No, I totally agree with you about its language for the audience, not your language. And if need be, you need to get someone to tell your story. Our little biochar group in New Zealand recently got a little video made up by someone involved in video studies at Massey, and they produced a 5-minute video in a language that I thought, I wonder about that, but that's exactly applicable because I'm not one of the people that I'm trying to sell biochar to. So they spoke and talking about how the electric vehicle was coming along, and it's only for one purpose. Potentially, while biochar has a whole lot of purposes, it's got this, that, and the other. And she was not someone like me preaching something slightly technical. Thanks.
It's interesting because. Do you need to? Don't let me butt in here. It's interesting. One of the things that we had a little comment that has stuck in my head lots is, and I think as Ansby, we're at this place where it's kind of this crisis. Now, crisis is not like an explosion. Crisis is a change of direction. And it's interesting, the Chinese symbol for crisis is actually made up of two things, danger and opportunity. And we all sit in the opportunity space. And sometimes we lose track of the danger space and how to communicate to that sort of thing. I often do a little illustration with people that may come to the site where I grab a tin can, like a can of fruit. I've actually bought 2 cans, but I got talked out of doing it today. I don't want to do it actually, I might embarrass myself. But I asked someone, do they trust me? And if they trust me, I said, okay, we've got a simple job for you. Take this can and smash your finger with the can. And it's like, no way, that's not possible. But if you do it right, if you grab the can sideways, lay your finger, you can hit it with all your strength. It looks horrendous, but it doesn't hurt. Now, I guess that tells the story as so often we want to just push people through. The regulators, we just want to push them through the process, through the communication. But we've got to sometimes stand, we've got to engage, we've got to lead them, we've got to do it first, which we are doing. But I guess that's the key point out of that is there's danger and opportunity. And that's, I think, what we need to learn to communicate.
Great, thanks, Drew. There's a few questions which I think might be directed to me on the Future Energy Australia fuel system. Yes, it's a high temperature pyrolysis system, and on the question on how sustainable is the long-term commercial application, it's completely sustainable. Life cycle analyses of similar projects overseas have shown a net drawdown of carbon when you account for the fact that you use the renewable fuel as a swap for conventional fossil diesel. So we're going through the process of those life cycle analysis and other things at the moment as we head towards bankability. And I wanted to use that as a lead into another question, perhaps for Andrew or others, about how do we fix that disconnect or the different languages between the traditional cottage industry biochar approach and bringing bigger financial backers and funding into the whole industry. What are the barriers to that? Does anyone want to offer any thoughts on that?
I've got lots to say.
Well, I think it's finding bigger vehicles. And so one of the things that I think both some of the two leaders who have already spoken here, Peter who's exiting and Nigel, we've got to think big, really big. And we need to find some vehicles that help take the biochar story forward, further, wider, into mainstream dialogue and news and promotion and awareness. So, not sure what some of those are, but I know there are lots of good ideas within the group here. So,
the scale is definitely the crucial thing, I agree. And time is upon us, unfortunately. So I thought what I might do is try and sort of recapitulate a few of the comments that have been made. We've spoken about the language we use and not calling it waste. We're not dealing with waste. We're dealing with a resource here. We've spoken about the idea of a biochar expo, and communicating better with relevant avenues to market, such as the agronomists that prescribe to land managers what to do on their farms. We've spoken about education and understanding, and that works to the community and also to the regulators in an overall social license type thing that is just crucial for operations at scale. And we've spoken about the disconnect between voluntary markets and the Australian ERF markets and the disparities there. Risks or opportunities, they're probably both. So it's been a really great discussion, guys. Thanks very much. Please put your hands together for Dennis Enright.